In this edition of Fifth Gear, one of the glamorous cars from the 70s, the Aston Martin Lagonda. Driving from London to Brighton in a smart crossblade, and how to drive round London's new congestion charge. Just for a minute, imagine you're going for a long cross-country drive in the wilds of Wales. Imagine you've got £90,000 to spend on a car. You want sports car handling, but you want it with all the comforts of an executive saloon. What you want is the best GT car your money can buy. Yes, you could be all patriotic, play James Bond and buy yourself an Aston Martin DB7. But in the back of your mind, you'd know that when fiction turned to reality, you'd be blown away by the opposition. Why? Because there are only really two choices, and they're both German. First, let me remind you that the perpetual honing of Porsche's 911 has been going on for 40 years. And apart from the odd specialist racing machine, since 1974, the Turbo has been its flagship model. It started out with what is now a rather puny 260 bhp, but that has grown to a mightily impressive 420, while the price has risen to 87.5 grand. But for years it's had no real challengers for the cross-country marathon, until another Stuttgart resident stepped into the ring. And Mercedes offer their SL55 with 476 bhp for just 2 grand more than the basic turbo. But is horsepower alone enough to steal the 911's crown? Let's face it, in recent years, Mercedes haven't really known what the meaning of fun is, fitting an ever-growing army of computers to take more and more control away from the driver. But now they've given their in-house tuning specialists, AMG, the task of producing something that's hopefully more than just a marketing ploy. They've slipped their fabled 5.5-litre V8 into the SL and supercharged it to produce that 476 bhp. In a mass-produced road car, it's almost bordering on madness. And in order to be able to cope with it, they produce brakes that dry themselves in the wet and a suspension system that's got an IQ and a personality. But more of all that later. First impressions first. To make the 55 more Armani and less Austin Reed, AMG have given the SL some much-needed visual oomph. There's no less than 10 scything fins, a stunning set of 18-inch alloys, some extra-length side skirts, and a tarmac-sucking lower front bib. It's a look that works well from the outside, but back on the inside, it's that wall of power that keeps grabbing your attention. Oh, this SL55 is oh so impressive. Awesome is a hard word to define, but this defines it. It seems to want to eat up the road as it growls along it, daring anything to get in its path. Now, although I've mentioned the huge horsepower of the SL55, I haven't yet mentioned the fact that it weighs 2 tons, and yet it can still get to 62 in just 4.7 seconds, with that big V8 almost shaking the ground beneath you. However, you do feel the weight of the car when you're driving it. The front wants to run wide when you push into corners, and potholes need to be avoided because they send shuddering shockwaves through the chassis. And then there's the constant little minor interruptions caused by those ever overprotective computers which want to take away some of my power or put a brake on. Of course, you can switch most of that assistance off, but then without a limited slip differential, you end up spinning all the power away to the inside rear wheel and create antics that really shouldn't be seen on public roads. Which is why our attention must turn back to the Porsche. The 911 911 may be 56 horsepower down, but it's also a massive 400 kilos lighter and leaps to 62 a full half a second quicker with its four-wheel drive. Yes, there's traction control here as well, but with a centre differential varying the power delivered to the front wheels from as little as 5% to as much as 50, you get a whole lot more action onto the tarmac before those computers spoil the fun. And even when they do it with far less obvious interruption. And you can delight in the use of this manual 6-speed gearbox. Yes, top gear is a bit long, but once you change to 5th gear, things really start to come alive. This is a car with soul. It's a car you drive, whereas the SL55 tends to drive you a bit too much. Whilst the Mercedes was awesome, this is simply superb. And if you really want to, you can now order your turbo with a $7,500 performance pack to give yourself another 30 horsepower. So is there anything the SL55 can do better? Well, of course there is, because if summer ever returns, it can do this. Transport me to Saint-Tropez for the next series and I might just change my mind. But for me, the 911 is a far better buy.
Some people think smart cars are a bit of a joke, and just for greenies who want to give Mother Earth a big hug. But they'd be wrong. They're actually driven by lots of improbable nutters who need a cult car to get enthusiastic about again.
And a load of those smart owners decided to get together and have their own rally. It's called the London to Brighton Run. Usually the preserve of crusty old giffers driving steam cars. Well, not anymore. It's a simple idea. You get a load of mates together and drive from London to Brighton. More of an issue when you got this many mates, though.
This summer, around 800 smart cars gathered at London's Alexandra Palace, ready for a 55-mile jaunt to vegetarian Brighton. Any random stray could sign up, provided they own one of these, and the more individual the car, the better, which is why this one is covered in plastic grass. That means to stand out in the smart club, you need to be a bit extra daft. So I got myself this, a smart crossblade.
If Satan designed a pram, then it'd look like this. If Judge Dredd was gay, then he'd probably fight crime in a crossblade. It's a smart with no roof, no doors, no windscreen, and no idea of weather protection. But the interior is entirely rubberised. Ugh.
And look how much noise it makes! Twice the amount of owners expected turned up on the day, which made getting the whole thing rolling a bit like chewing tinfoil. Still, once we'd made the parade, all we had to do was go and get our picture taken in London and then onto the coast. Except it didn't quite work out that way. It sounds so simple. Drive up to Hyde Park Corner, circle a couple of times and line up for a snap. Don't crash and try not to feed the locals. But London wasn't playing ball. Have you ever tried cruising with 800 mates? Yes, it really is that bad. You only need one of these crossblades if you're bored of heat, comfort and hearing. The 3-cylinder engine is the size of a handbag, 0.6 of a litre, that's about a pint, but with a turbo to give it a bit of a chaser. 16.5 grand? Don't make me laugh!
A crossblade's got 10 horsepower more than a normal smart. But because it weighs a little bit more, it's not actually any quicker. But if you take off the windscreen and the doors, it means it feels really fast.
But the crossblade could have been capable of the double ton. It makes no difference stuck in traffic moving no faster than walking pace. Following the photo call, the London to Brighton run became the London to Brighton sit still.
We have travelled 2 miles in 50 minutes. Count them, 50 minutes. Why have a city car when you can't go anywhere in it? London is crap. Get me out of this place. I hate it. I hate it. Just sort it out, London.
And when you eventually do get out of town, you get this. Now, I knew this was going to be interesting. But on the motorway, the crossblade is like repeatedly hitting yourself in the head with a hammer. It's no fun and pretty pointless. Juggernauts pass by, spraying you with unburnt diesel, and small children mouth obscenities from the backseats of coaches. You need a really big ego to drive a crossblade without a bag on your head. It's lucky that. It took 5 hours. But eventually we'd reached the finish line where we found more cars and had actually started the rally. At least 100 had joined up on the way through London just to see what was going on. So smart owners are easy to pick up as well as being a bit, special.
So you're obsessed with cows then?
Yes, it's my pride and joy.
And this is what, vinyl?
Yeah, all the panelling's all done with vinyl.
So you've made a cow out of Smart?
Yes.
And it's got ears?
It's got ears, I put the ears on.
And it's full of cows?
And it's full of cows.
You've really got to get over this thing with cows, haven't you? So, if a standard Smart will do 0 to 60 in about 17.5 seconds, how fast will this go?
We're looking at a good 12 maybe
seconds.
11 nines.
So it's fairly, well, a lot quicker than a standard Smart.
Yeah.
But this event left me asking myself if there really is such a thing as a standard Smart. All the panels pop on and off in about half an hour, so they're easy to personalise. The variety was huge.
See, the whole thing about the Smart London to Brighton is it's actually pretty hard to get into if you haven't got one. But this is pop culture with vehicles. It's a new cult in a world of niches. And because Smarts are so cheeky and cheap, it means you can get into that club for about £6 grand, which is great. It's like bug jam for people with good hair and furniture from Habitat. So if you want to get cool, get a Smart.
Coveted by schoolboys, Arabs and pools winners, the wedge-shaped Aston Martin Lagonda of '76 is one of those cars that's in dire danger of being deified. And you can see why. Dramatic, startling even, the pointy lag sported a blameless bloodline, computer wizardry, a stout 4-cam British V8 and a cabin straight out of Captain Scarlet. Perfect credentials, in fact, to send it and its used prices ricocheting into the big bucks classic car stratosphere. But before we allow the superlatives to pile up to shoulder height, it's worth remembering that this car was nothing more than a publicity stunt for Aston Martin. It's 1976. There's a huge oil crisis. Nobody's buying Aston V8s. The receiver has been at the factory for over a year, and the bank manager is round the corner with his engine running. Aston badly needed some PR, and they got it. This is the car that saved Aston Martin. But it didn't save Aston because it sold in huge numbers, no. In 14 years, only 645 Aston Martin Lagondas were sold. No, it saved Aston because when it came out, 250 people each placed deposits of 2,500 quid for this car, and Aston used that money to bankroll their future. So, knowing all this, can we really give the wedge-shaped Aston Martin Lagonda a place in the hallowed motoring Hall of Fame? And the answer to that one is a big, fat no. Yes, it was one of the most audacious designs of the decade, and yes, it was hand-built with a heart-stoppingly heavy price tag of 50 grand, the equivalent of $250,000 in the 70s. And yes, it had a Baroque interior that looked like it was furnished for Hugh Hefner and Liberace. And I know those touch-sensitive switches must have seemed more futuristic than a Sinclair C5, and the digital instrument display would have wowed all those fledgling computer geeks in Silicon Valley. But the Aston Martin Lagonda has one character flaw that prevents it being elevated to classic status. It looks like hell. And even Lady Tavistock, who was involved in the original launch and was the first public owner, even she sounds, well, a touch lukewarm.
The very first time we went on the road in it, it was quite terrifying because we had a backup vehicle behind because it could easily have stopped because it was, I think, one of the first cars with a computer, an onboard computer, and they were much bigger then and they were also very unreliable. So it was very nerve-wracking. Of course it was exciting, but you just wondered always when you set off on a trip, where you going to get there? Everybody would turn around and look at it and what was it, and it created a lot of excitement. Some people absolutely hated it, other people thought it was beautiful. I still think you'd have exactly the same reactions today. It was fun. Couldn't put anything in it, but it was fun.
But if you're expecting the performance to be as dramatic as the looks, you're going to be very, very disappointed. It just simply is not that quick. It's a typical Slushmatic. 280 bhp detuned V8 engine, and you might top out at 140, but the acceleration, it is honestly nothing to write home about. Body control is quite good, ride's quite good, but steering, there's a bit of slop, and this stupid steering wheel, like something out of Joe 90. Honestly, I really could hate this car if I tried hard. Really, really could hate it. It's just so horribly 70s. One of the most interesting things with these cars is to walk around them and spot all the parts from other cars. We've got in here XJ6 ashtrays, Rover 3500 cigarette lighter, the rear shocks, the Rover 3500, the door handles, a Ford Cortina. And when a lot of the parts were Ford sourced, what they had to do was to file off the Ford emblem on the parts, because most of them went to the Middle East, and at that time, America was the great Satan, so they didn't want some sheikh pulling a switch, seeing the dreaded blue oval and thinking, Americans, no, 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 no. It just is an interesting piece of history, no more, no less. Now, you can buy one of these in reasonable fettle for around £10,000 to £12,000. And if you want something that turns the heads of every single bus queue, then fine. But as your car advisor, I would say no. Because financially, it's going to be a nightmare. You'll need friends at Fort Knox to run this car. Most of them have had not one set of sills, but 2, 3, even 4. The electrics are a complete nightmare, and it's just one of those cars that was just not well built. So you'll get all the attention, but you and your bank manager will form a long and meaningful relationship.
This car never really looked comfortable with itself. But it isn't old-fashioned, it isn't modern, it's itself. And perhaps that is a good epitaph. It was only itself. It was never an imitation, and no one has ever imitated it.
Which, let's be frank, is probably just as well, because the world really only needs one Aston Martin Lagonda. So let's not use words like iconic, legend, or motoring milestone. Let's see the Aston Martin Lagonda for what it really is, a flamboyant flourish of the designer's pencil meant to whip up some badly needed PR. This is not a great car. Some may say it is. It is merely one of those pieces of 70s kitsch that has grown old rather too disgracefully.
London, the old smoke. God blimey, I don't half love it. But I hate the traffic. There are 2.8 million registered cars in the capital, and the roads are at breaking point.
If the situation gets any worse, our capital will reach gridlock. So Mayor Ken Livingstone has decided to implement a congestion-busting scheme, which he hopes will encourage people to use our ailing public transport system whilst cutting traffic. And if you live outside London, don't think you'll escape. If it's successful, other cities will follow.
From February the 17th next year, the City of London are going to charge £5 a day to enter the central area. That's roughly the bit in between the inner ring roads from 7 in the morning till 6:30 at night.
There won't be any barriers or bollards, but there won't be any escape either. There's 200 million quid's worth of CCTV. That's over 230 cameras, all armed and anxious to spot my registration and send it back to a central computer to make sure I've paid.
So, if you don't want to shell out a fiver every day, but still want to keep the independence of your own set of wheels, what can you do? Easy. All you need is one life jacket, oh yeah, and one amphibious car.
That's right, an amphibious car. 24 grand's worth of Dutton Commander. It's got a 1.9 litre Renault Megane engine, 4-wheel drive, and on the water it can travel at 6 miles an hour.
Who said travelling to work had to be boring? Bon voyage.
You can drive from your home to a river slip road near the central zone and propel yourself to the centre. There's a lot less traffic and no speed cameras. The only trouble is that if you don't want to park near the river, it's hardly very handy.
The mooring charges are only £1,000 a year, which isn't too bad, but there are only a handful of slips onto the Thames itself, which could make life pretty difficult. Shiver me timbers, I was quite getting into it. Full ahead both, Mr. Simpson. Of course, you could always buy a house in central London. Residents get a 90% reduction on the daily charge, so it's just 50p a day. But with house prices running into millions, the sums just don't stack up. Anything with more than 9 seats is exempt, whether you use them or not. So you could buy yourself an old minibus. Not exactly congestion busting, I know. But hey, I didn't make the rules. But if you're not into people carrying, don't worry, because anything with 2 wheels is exempt as well. Even 1,500 cc's of hardcore hedonism like this. Or there's the conventional scooter. Or what about a fold-away one? This is more like it.
You can park up a few miles out of town, pull it out of your car boot and ride into the city. And most people can ride it on an ordinary car licence. It only costs 1,400 quid and will do 30 miles an hour. It's really easy to use and traffic isn't an issue. Then you can fold it up again, put it under your desk until you want to go home.
Brilliant! And London also has a place where you can try before you buy. Carter Healy runs a sort of charitable outfit called A Go to B, where you can explore all forms of scooters and bikes and see how you get on.
From his haunt under the A40, you can try anything ranging from a pristine C5, bikes that can tow your own wardrobe, waterproof scooters, bikes without chains, kiddie rickshaws, and my favourite but least practical, this psychedelic homage to the 1970s. Electric-powered cars like Ford's Think are also exempt from the congestion charge, and he'll rent you one for £10 a day. Are all these really better than public transport?
It's better to be self-sufficient. It's better to know when you're going to get there. It's better to know how you're going to get there and to not rely upon so many factors which you have no control over. We have this independence and luxury of a car, and having grown up with cars and the convenience of it, we don't want to give that up.
But it may be that odd sorts of scooters or bikes aren't for you. If you're the sort of person who doesn't like attracting attention of the unwanted sort, you may want to stick with 4 wheels and a car.
Happily, some of those are exempt from congestion charges too, such as all approved LPG cars, as are all hybrid cars, ones that use a combination of conventional and battery power, which is ridiculous, because even though they're more economical and environmentally friendly, they're exactly the same size as ordinary cars. So where's the congestion busting in that?
Well, we're not sure, but Volvo, Honda and Toyota don't want to miss a trick, so they sell such cars straight off the shelf. LPG is half the cost of petrol, and the bi-fuel Volvo is hardly any more expensive than the standard car. At under 16 grand, both the Toyota and Honda are hybrids. They may look as though they've been designed in the dark, but thanks to combined battery and petrol power, they average 65 miles to the gallon in town. And all these cars feel and drive like the real thing.
So there are ways around paying that £5 a day, but I don't want to buy another car and I don't want to compromise what little credibility I've got left on one of those trendy scooters. So for the time being, I'm going to stick with my car. I wonder how many of you will do the same. We'll see.